Yeah.
Have you followed at all this guy Derek Anderson running for Spanberger seat in Virginia 7th?
No, but she was a really good candidate, by the way. I was a big fan of her campaigns.
Yeah, I assume she's going to be the next governor. I think she's got what it takes. This guy, so I happened to see this on Twitter, but they took some screen grabs from a video, and I think it's still on his YouTube channel. I need to double check now, but it was a campaign video that they didn't air it on TV, but it's him with like a wife and 3 daughters. They're not his family. And then later in the ad, it's him at a dining room table with the same woman and the same 3 daughters, still not his family. They are the family. They are the wife and 3 daughters of his friend. And he's been called out. I mean, there was a New York Times article about it. There's also something in the Post, which I have will link to. But the campaign says this is ridiculous. He wasn't trying to make it look like he had a family. It's like, dude, hey, don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. I see with my eyes what you got going on here. All right, Chris, we're back. Today is post VP debate day.
Fire!
We messaged back and
Fire! Sorry.
That's why you can't. That's why we have to have some censorship, because you might say fire in a crowded theater. We did talk last night. I think you were one of the sane people that was watching the Padres. By the way, I caught the end of the Padres Braves game after the debate. Do you have any regrets, or was the game far better than the debate? I assume
Far better. I mean, I watched the debate this morning. I went through it at fairly high rate, and but no, the Padres game was much better. And historically, I was once kicked out of Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia for heckling Bobby Cox of the Braves. So I fucking hate it. And to get thrown out of the, I mean,
when I was
if you're from Philly, that like to get thrown out of the vet in the 80s it took some doing. I mean, they actually had a judge for Eagles games in a prison in the thing. So anyway.
Yeah, that's right. I was a bit of a Braves fan when I was in late elementary, middle school. I lived in Virginia, and that was where the AAA team played. It was in Richmond. I assume they probably still do, but that was when Abbott was their pitcher, the one-arm pitcher, and he would like throw it and put the thing on the thing and catch it. And Bobby Cox was there. Yeah. I mean, what an amazing story. Anyway, I'm no longer a Braves fan, but I remember that was the time that I was a Braves fan. All right. Well, okay. So high level take. Have you been reading any of the punditry on the debate?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things going on. I think that the consensus is that not only did Vance do well, Vance kind of overperformed, and Walz probably underperformed. I don't think a VP debate matters shit, but I think it was a nice boost for Trump, who was not having a great couple weeks. And you also, I think you also saw for the first time why he picked Vance. Vance was very articulate. He was very smooth. And you look at the guy and you kind of go, okay, he could be president. You could kind of imagine that. And, and Walz was just kind of like, and I think, I hate to make fun. Well, actually, I don't hate to make fun. So who am I kidding? But kind of the cheap haircut and the bug eyes on stuff. It was kind of like, it was just kind of weird. It was like, so, and I don't know, some people I read, God, who was it? Maybe it was Josh Barrow from Left, Right, and Center on NPR. Might have been he that said that Walz has gotten much worse, and that is a function of his debate prep. And that is, I mean, sometimes you can, I mean, I've done debate preps, and sometimes you can over prep guys.
Okay, that was what I was going to ask. Yeah. So it was a function of over preparation or not enough preparation?
No, I just think not enough preparation. And a couple pundits.
Oh, okay.
A couple pundits, and Vance has done the most interviews of any candidate on either ticket by like a large amount. I mean, it was some crazy. It was like 30 interviews or something, which is a significant amount. And and if you were, and a lot of them weren't good. But I think that when you're in that kind of combative situation, you know what the questions are going to be and what your responses and what works and what don't work, what doesn't work. And I think that they hidden Harris and Walz, but they have hidden Walz. He hasn't done an interview yet. And I think that kind of deer in the headlight things happens. Just professional athletes have to practice. Professional politicians have to practice. And
Yeah.
you can do and there's no substitute for game experience.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, it's really intimidating. I mean, you're going out to the free world. This is that moment last night was the biggest stage either of them have ever been on, and it can be intimidating. And you freeze up if you
Yeah.
want to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because when it first started and I'm watching it, the first answer, I mean, just from the first words out of Tim Walz's mouth, I was like, is there a lag in my reception? Or is he sounds like Joe Biden in the way that he's answering this? Is he
Yeah.
searching for literally word by word what to say? You could tell instantly that he was incredibly nervous. Do you agree then? I mean, I think, is this going to determine the outcome of the election?
No,
Highly
I don't.
improbable.
It's
But
not going to. It doesn't matter shit. I mean, it
do
doesn't matter.
you agree then with what is most people are saying, depending on if you're listening to Partisans or not, but most people are saying that Vance won, Walz didn't win, he lost. Do you agree? If you agree with that, do you also agree with some of the other stuff in the sense of the substantive version, which is it was more a function of presentation than substance? That is why Vance won. Do you agree with that?
No, no, no. I mean, you can tell who won. If you really want to find out who won or lost the debate, go to the partisan outlets. Go to MSNBC. Go to Newsmax. Go to. I was going to say Fox, but not even Fox. But, and whatever they're shrieking about. That's kind of what happened. The opposite is what happened. And so no, I don't agree on the substantive thing. But you raise a really good point that I was chatting with a friend of mine this morning about. That if you look at, I'm trying to think. I'm going to be like Walz here, or I'll sound like Biden and be incoherent. If you look at the latest national surveys, one of the standard questions they asked.
All right, Chris, we're back. What's really cool is that at some point we're going to have to find some sponsor, take those breaks and drop in some, make some coin off this. I'm going to reach out to RT and see if Russia wants to kick a little coinage our way.
Yeah, for that, what, 100 grand a month, 400 grand a month, fucking count me in, comrade.
Yeah.
I mean,
workers of the world unite, my man.
Holy shit. Yeah. If you can make that coin every month, you won't be a worker for long. Right?
100%. I definitely won't need to join the ILA. That's true.
Right. By the way.
All right. So I think we were,
I have one of my best friends. One of my best friends is ILA, or was ILA, as was his father, as was his grandfather. And, automation is a different argument. But trust me when I say any dollar that those guys get paid is well worth it, because it is the most miserable, hardest, back-breaking fucking work in the world. I mean, especially in like the northeast parts of the country, like you go in the middle of fucking February down on the water and unloading giant things with your hands and hooks. Holy shit.
I do actually have the ILA strike on our agenda, so we can jump into it. It's interesting. I had no idea that this fucking guy, the head of it, you probably know these things, but I started looking into what was going on because I actually think curious what your take is. I think this and Israel, Iran are going to be potentially something that could really determine the outcome of the election, far more than a VP debate. They can cripple the economy. That can have a huge effect. And so I started digging into this guy. I guess he and Trump go back like 40 years, right? They're both from Queens, and I think that they've known each other for a long time. He makes like over $9K a year, has a 76-foot yacht and a Bentley, and was indicted on RICO charges, but acquitted only after the key witness was found dead.
It's a coincidence.
I mean, yeah. I don't begrudge the working man, but there are some serious questions there. My question to you is going to be in the agenda is there any world where my guess, the deal that was made between Netanyahu and Trump, Netanyahu's come right out and said, we're not going to negotiate anything until December.
Right.
And then now this happening, not that it's maybe intentional that there's a conspiracy, but there is a belief that we can get a better deal in December if we make it a little bit harder for the people that we don't want to be in office, so we get somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, in terms of the ILA guy, I mean, him making $1 million a year, frankly, is not extraordinary for a union head. I mean, I think that's about what Randy Weingard makes, and and again,
Yeah.
It's a big ass job. I mean, they're the CEO of a giant fucking company, is really what they are. So I don't get too upset about that, and I don't get too upset about, or I don't see a lot of conspiracies. But I think both Netanyahu. So I think let's go to the Israel thing. It's like, yeah, Blinken and Biden aren't going to be there. He's going to get Harris or Trump, and he gets a new hand to play. And initially, anyway, Harris looks more amenable, or has been signaling she's more amenable to him. And so, so Netanyahu, I mean, he's got to wait a couple months, and it's worth it to get a better deal. I don't particularly think, there was a conspiracy on the same thing, and the same thing with the IL, the Longshoremen's union. I just think it's like, we're going to get a better deal. I mean, Biden basically said, let's give the Longshoremen what they want. But I think you are 100% right, is that both of these things will matter much more than, the VP debate, and whether an elected official understands Brandenburg or Schenck versus the U.S. from 1919. You would hope they would. There's a different story. Simply, and not even the results of it. But if you've got a world in crisis, and you've got the potential for a World War III, it ain't a great fucking reflection on your administration. And basically, if you've got a handful of people shutting down the economy, it's not a great reflection for your administration. And, and Harris is a part of that. I mean, it's just like, I want change. I don't want these guys. And again, I think that both of these really hurt her. But so.
I agree with that. I agree that they hurt her, and the outcomes potentially hurt her. The interesting thing about what you said and the conventional wisdom that I've been listening to is that my counter to that is that there's a world in crisis argument, or like we're in the middle of conflicts. That used to be a reason not to make a change. I mean, that was what secured Bush in 2004, is that you don't want to replace an administration in the middle of a conflict action, right? So in some ways, I think it's almost that. Yeah.
No, but I mean, in 80, we replaced Carter in the middle of that. I mean, it really depends how you're seen handling it. But you're right. I mean, it's tricky, and I do think we're kind of the terrain is different for a lot of reasons, and not the least of being that you've got a sitting VP running against a former president. And I think that's the first time, right? Or maybe,
I think, did Teddy Roosevelt, when he ran for the third term, did he run against
I was going to say the third,
any incumbent?
I think maybe the third term, Roosevelt's third term in 1916.
Yeah. Which was
You
for
know,
the Progressive Party, right?
yeah, almost.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess my assumption about, I think you're totally right. It's a very kind of unique
yeah,
modern thing that's happening right now with the way the candidates are lined up. But the Carter situation and the current situation, in my opinion, are almost overly dramatized. We are not actively engaged in military conflict. And I think that's where it kind of bifurcates, right? If you're in the middle of a war, I mean, Johnson, I guess, would be an example, but he kind of walked away from it knowing that
yep,
he needed to get out. But I think, I do think that if it was more of an actual live conflict that we were involved in, it kind of plays to the incumbent, as long as it's still a popular effort that's ongoing. These other things, the Iran crisis and the current situation is happening, it's almost an acknowledgement. Most people I hear talking about these two things really don't give a shit. It feels far away. It's not affecting us. We like to talk about abstracts about it because it's not really jeopardizing us yet. And I think that's where it breaks down, is that it's almost contrived in a way, and so it's easily broken down along party lines, so it can hurt the incumbent more. That's my kind of read on it.
yeah, and I think you in this. So one of the interesting things in a survey, I think before I had to get my package, there was a survey that was out this week, and I think when you said disconnect, that's the right word, because one of the standard questions you ask on a survey is who do you trust more on this issue? Or who do you think will do a better job? And when you look at the most recent one, that Harris is within 8 points of Trump handling immigration. Trump is within 9 points of Harris on protecting democracy. And I think what you see now is I think you see parties and partisans that are essentially disconnected from reality. I mean, to be fucking fair, I mean, both of these should be 80-20 questions the other way. I mean, and,
Right.
you can parse whether she was just called a czar, or she was an appointed czar, or she had business cards that said czar. And you can say, well, there was a turnover, there was a handover of power in January 6th and Trump wasn't indicted. But you've got January 6th and immigration, which are giant things that can be both laid at each other's feet. And in a normal world, in the world that we grew up in, that should be an 80-20 question either way. But the idea that it's within, almost not quite the margin of error for both means that people are absolutely disconnected from reality. And there's a guy named Jacob Shell, who's an online commentator who is from Temple University, my alumni, along with Bill Cosby and Ted Bundy. Well, they're alumni. The Bill Cosby was my commencement speaker. And
Wow.
but he was a Philadelphian who was this beloved, especially back in 1980, he was this beloved figure, and
Yeah.
then you find out he's drugging and raping women, but that's a whole, other thing. But he had this really interesting,
That's a Rutgers thing. That's a Rutgers thing, not Temple, right?
Temple thing, right? But he had this really interesting thing, is that in many ways, both the left and the right have gone woke. And they will protect their worldview at all costs. And for the right, what they've done is they've created their own information ecosystem. And Fox News is the easiest, but Fox News is actually mainstream compared to like Newsmax, and you also look at different websites, or frankly even Twitter flows or Reddit flows. The right has created this entire information system. And on the left, the dominant thing is that anything we don't agree with is misinformation and must be censored by the government. And that is a way, and that's what Twitter was. I mean, Twitter was, that to Abby's, Twitter files are pretty conclusive that the government was leaning on tech companies, and frankly, Zuckerberg pretty much said the same thing, leaning on tech companies to censor stuff. And again, I mean, there is, we're back to Brandenburg and Schenck again, is that, if there is a clear and present danger on something, yeah, absolutely. If there's disagreement, and even if it's wrong, it needs to be allowed. But both sides have created this woke thing, and I think what happens is that you kind of get sucked in. I mean, basically you're living in a bubble. But I think that, when you map out where people are getting information or how they want information, you create this disconnect where protecting democracy and fighting immigration, you've got candidates that are essentially equal right. Which is kind of insane.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing, but it is a thing.
Yeah, I think that's feels right in the world that I'm observing. I think the one interesting thing about that, where I do think, to bring it to the debate a little bit, where I think Walz was extraordinarily effective last night, was with abortion, even to the point where it made. I don't know if it made, but JD Vance and the team had prepared him to sound almost like a Democrat on the issue. And there is something that I put, it's funny that we're talking about this, because I plan to talk about, if you look at Google Trends searches for the lead up, the day prior to the debate and during the debate, and you compare border, immigration, crime, abortion, all these issues, and there's a map, I'll share it with you in the run through of this, but it is a very kind of color-coded view of the United States that you would expect. So Texas and the South and certain areas, they're maybe more interested in inflation or in the border or in this or in that. During the debate, the entire country, Google Trend-wise, was searching abortion and abortion in my state and all of these things. And I felt like he was extremely effective in the argument. And I didn't even know this, I mean, I knew that the Mayo Clinic was there, but how advanced and how much the quality of healthcare and all of these things that are in place in Minnesota. And if you look at the Google searches, that's the way it breaks down. They're comparing their state to like Minnesota. And then for him to say, we can also offer a child tax credit and help people with their families, and also have the government mind its own business when it comes to your body. The interesting thing for me to add my own philosophical conundrum here is the way that there seems to be a breakdown in the chain of logic when things conflict in the human mind. So JD Vance can say something like, the administration is all for censorship and getting in your business, which he positions himself against, but yet he's very much for your bodily autonomy and what you can talk about and do with your doctor. It seems to me to be a pretty straight line. Why doesn't the government just mind its own fucking business, as long as what I'm doing does not infringe on the rights of someone else? That's where the line is clear, right?
Yeah,
I manage myself as long as I don't infringe on someone else.
Yeah, and the classic pro-life position on that is that the fetus is at a certain, and this is the big debate, good luck, the fetus is a person, and just as you don't have a right to kill another person, you don't have a right to abort a fetus because it is kind of in your care. I mean, that's the classic pro-life position. In Roe, the Supreme Court said, we don't know where life begins, but we're going to say it's going to begin in the third trimester. I mean, good luck with that. And I mean, you could, which is why inevitably it was going to be overturned, because that's not a scientific opinion. It's a political one, and that's a legislative one. But so there is a disconnect there, but not if you're a pro-lifer. If you're pro-life, then the fetus has rights as well.
I've heard that argument. It's an interesting one because it tends to break down along religious
Yeah.
belief systems. Having been raised Catholic, the Catholic dogmas, which was the first Christian church, was that the first breath at birth was the Holy Spirit, was the Spirit entering the body. That was when life began. That was when you were absorbing the Spirit. That's that is a belief, but I think it's not hard to say, and I think that there is agreement that wherever we can determine there is a viable fetus that can live outside of its mother, I think Democrats and Republicans have both agreed. And actually, Vance said it last night, which actually shocked me that I felt like it was a huge missed opportunity for Walz. He said, we already have a national late-term abortion ban. And if he truly believed what Donald Trump says about we send it back to the states where it should be, then we should not even have that ban. The
Right.
states should determine whether or not there's a late-term abortion, not you at the federal government.
Right.
So I think there's just this like voodoo logic that we contort ourselves to fit what feels good for our belief systems in the world. And I just don't think that that's the government legislative process that gets the best outcomes. It is politics, however, and it's human nature. I get that. But I feel like those are the points where Walz, he scored a point, but he also missed an opportunity there and said, sorry, JD, but I thought you were for sending this back to the states. Why are you for a national late-term abortion ban? I didn't think you. And he even said, I think there should be something at a certain time frame of 15 weeks. He also acknowledged that there should be another national law. So it's either at the state level or it isn't. And I mean, I just don't see the continuation of the logic. It breaks down, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And on the other side, many things break down the same way.
Yeah.
Everyone does this.
Abortion is a stone dead winner for Walz, and it's a stone dead winner for Democrats generically. And infanticide is a thing. What viability outside the womb is a moving target with healthcare. And then the question becomes, if you deliver a baby early in the third trimester and it can't live, and that's where you get into the heartbeat arguments. And,
Sure.
If there's a beating heart, if there's brain waves, I mean, it's a little beyond my pay grade. But again, I think the United States is going to wind up with some kind of a Euro 8 to 24 weeks, 12. I think you're going to come in 12 to 24 weeks. You're probably going to come in around, most states are going to have, basically codify Roe, basically that in legislation. And, I think 7 states now allow for, frankly, late term if there is life of the mother, or health of the mother. I think there's 7 or 8 states now that allow that. And again, I think you're going to win it out. I mean, so we had another offline discussion that I think is kind of interesting with this. And it kind of plays into both the abortion thing. And so, once abortion goes away, and it will at some point, it's going to be a big benefit to Republicans. And I had a thought this week is that, the common thought is that Trump is changing the Republican Party and he's empowered the Republican Party in the modern era, and he's reshaping it into his own. What if that's wrong? What if the real issue is that Trump is essentially coalescing Democrats not to become Republicans, and that Trump is the impediment? And I'm not going to say that everybody's going to become Republicans. That's not what I mean. But I mean that the parties are going to de-align, and you're not going to recognize them. And Trump, because he's such a polarizing figure, he's uniting Democrats who would otherwise be Republicans, a little more socially conservative and a little more economically liberal, as opposed to the other way around traditionally. And so it's interesting to see Trump as not the realigner, but Trump as the impediment. He's the speed bump for this realignment. And I thought that was kind of an interesting argument, because it kind of makes sense. I mean, we're not going to know until Trump is gone or dead or whatever. but it'll be interesting to see because, with all of Trump's negatives and all of Trump's hubris and all of Trump's problems, for Christ's sake, how much do you have to hate what the Democrats stand for to have 40, almost half the country saying we don't like what you're selling? We're going to go with the
Yeah.
We're going to go with the 78-year-old convicted felon who can't string a sentence together because we hate you so much. I mean that's kind of a. I mean that should be a wake up call.
That should be a real wake up call for sure. Because even if you look at 2020 during COVID and kind of roundly attacked for his handling of COVID in the middle of COVID, he still got more votes than he got in 2016.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I will say this, and I'm curious what your take is on this. I have said, I think my ex-wife was European. I would travel in Europe and talk to Europeans, and one of the things people would talk about is like our two-party system. And I would say, no, I don't think it's a two-party system. I actually think that you have multiple parties that are coalitions under big tents. And so my question to you is, do you think that it's actually the two-party system that's dying that Trump is keeping in place? And that, I mean, not that there won't remain two parties, but are we going to see a death of a certain party, kind of like the Whigs died, or kind of like the Federalists or whatever, and it will look different, kind of the entire political landscape, where you'll have social Democrats and they may caucus with Democrats on some issues and Republicans on others. We may still use those two words, Democrats and Republicans, but it'll be seen more as a coalition rather than a party.
Yeah, welcome to a separate podcast, which is my one of my lectures, and it was the lecture I gave. I'm a name drop here when I lectured at Oxford, and kind of one of my ongoing academic lectures is what I call the 5-party theory.
Oh, look at you, fucking fancy at Oxford.
I know, right? Yeah. By the way, it's great, and like it's incredible to go and like knowing you're the fucking dumbest person within like 5 square miles. Like it wasn't even close, right? But actually Oxford.
We have to eventually talk about if you went into like the teachers. I'm sure they have like a private club. I'm sure there's so many interesting stories about that.
I did, and I did what they call is dined at the high table, and basically dining at the high table in the Harry Potter movies when all the kids are there and there's the professors up. Like I was up, and like literally that's what it looks like. And it was the most impressive thing.
Yeah.
And when I was there, they, when I got the invitation, they said it, and feel free. We dress. It's not formal dress. By they meant, tuxedo, dinner jacket. They said it's dress, but not formal dress. But feel free to wear your robes. And I'm like, what? My fucking bathrobe? I mean, that's what I got. I graduated college. They give you the vinyl thing with the cheap hat, right? With the plastic hat. It was vinyl. It looked like a fucking poncho. That was my robe. But anyway, but Oxford was pretty amazing, as was Cambridge, or as is Cambridge. So post-war America, you literally wound up with multiple parties, and parties coalesce around issues, but they don't coalesce around them long term. And so what you'll see, and the easiest way to see this is that you go from JFK, who was a war hero and was going to invade the Bay of Pigs and going to start World War III and running CIA ops in South America and, was a tax cutter, cut taxes, to LBJ, which was great.
He was a Republican, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. I mean, right now he'd be like the hardcore Republican. And Trump liking his womanizing too, I guess, right? But then you go to LBJ, who is this expansive, social network or social network, and created anti-poverty programs. To George McGovern in '72. I'm skipping over Humphrey. Humphrey was, and he was this kind of, this anti-war Democrat. And then you but if you look at it, the party's changed. And the same thing, jumping from Richard Nixon to Barry Goldwater between 60 and 64, and then back to Nixon, and, Nixon creating, the EPA and HUD, and creating all these different cabinet positions and massive expanse of the federal government, back to Reagan. And, whether you can argue whether Reagan expanded government, of course he did, but he talked the small government game. So you see parties kind of moving all over the place, and voters kind of following around. I mean, I always joke that, the Democrats have the traditional dinner used to be called Jefferson Jackson Day dinners. And, if you can find any connection between Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson, fucking let me know. I mean, Jesus. But and that has any kind of, similarity to Joe Biden or Bill Clinton, I forget it. So really what happens is that parties coalesce and recoalesce and coalesce and coalesce. And I think what we're seeing right now is a very interesting change, that Republicans are going to be the socially conservative party who are economically liberal. They're going to basically become 1960s and 70s ethnic Democrats, like the people, like the Italians and the Poles and the Irish Catholics that I kind of grew up with, that they became socially conservative and economically liberal because they were unions or they were working people. And the Democrats are going to become, the party of Wall Street and they are now the party of Wall Street, Silicon Valley and the coast, and, higher education. Until 2016, if you were college educated, if you were a college graduate, you overwhelmingly voted Republican. If you were in high school, if you had a high school education, you overwhelmingly voted Democrat. That's absolutely flipped. And so to your question is, there's multiple parties and people find their way within that. And the parties themselves and the party leaders kind of pretend that nothing's ever changed. And, Abraham Lincoln is just like Richard Nixon, who was just like Ronald Reagan, who was just like Donald Trump. Right.
Right. When you say the party, when you describe the future parties as socially conservative and economically progressive for like Republicans and stuff, or economically the party of populism, do you mean in their political messaging or in their policy stances?
Both. I mean, protectionism is now a Republican thing.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How does that jive with many of so I guess I would say democratic economic populism, because you used LBJ as an example, was presented as large amounts of spending on fostering the middle class, like growing the middle class, raising people out of poverty. That was the attempt anyway, right? Whereas now, what I see coming out of Congress in both houses in both chambers is votes against those things rather than for them. And I think that's the thing that I've been waiting to see, is that I think you can talk a great game of economic populism, but if you look at the things that are done, you wonder if it's real or if it's just for the politics. That's why I asked if it's just for the politics.
I think it's a tempered reality. I mean, politicians are full of shit, should come as a shock to no one. But, I think the reality is that, you're looking at record in 10 years, the debt service is going to be more than we spend on stuff in this country. And the biggest drivers, frankly, are social welfare, are Social Security and Medicare. And there is no easy fix to them. So that's going to continue to eat the budget. And, Trump is promising, and if he gets elected, it will be the Republican policy, enhancing Social Security and not, I mean, he said, not pay taxes on your Social Security, and I'm at the age where I'm fucking all for that, but it's terrible economic policy. And it's like Democrats usually rally against tax cuts, but they never rescind them. I mean,
Yeah. Because it's politically.
The George Bush tax cut, it came up for,
yeah,
to redo it. And Obama said, yeah, absolutely. And the same thing with Biden and, the Trump tax cut.
Totally.
I mean, you got the power to fucking rescind it.
Right.
And the same thing.
But would you say that the economic populism aspect then is agreed? We need to get our budget in order. But the question in my mind is, if you are truly the party of the middle class, then wouldn't you be more like a Bernie Sanders, which says, yes, we need more money coming into the treasury, but it should not be at the expense of working people who are paying a higher percentage of their income than billionaires. It's interesting because I hear the party of what you're saying, but then I hear Republicans bashing what sounds like a very progressive, economically progressive idea, which is the unrealized gains tax, which, by the way, something needs to be done about the shell that is a corporation to avoid taxes. But whether or not that's the right choice or not, it is certainly an economically progressive and populist idea that these people need to pay more. But they get lambasted from it rather than the other side usurping it and saying that's actually what we're going to do, and we're going to go a step further.
Yeah, and I think that yes, but I mean, Bernie Sanders is not his economic stuff isn't particularly serious because he can't figure out how to pay for what. There's a very smart guy, another guy that's very interesting to follow on social media, Brian Rydell, who was a Republican, but at one point he was a Republican budget guy, but he hates Republicans now more than Democrats. Every 6 months or so, he comes out with these like 200-page graph and chart thing. And, basically says we're all kind of fucked. And sometimes you raise taxes and there is a point of lessening returns. I think that among working people, there is kind of this peasant knowledge that when they talk about, taxing certain things that previously weren't taxed, we know you're going to pay. I mean, in 1967, there was a congressional hearing about 12 families that did not pay any taxes. And so Congress passed, or maybe 15 families, but passed something called the AMT, the alternate minimum tax.
Right.
And which kind of makes sense to make everybody pay their fair share. But what Congress did, and with inflation, pretty soon, if you were middle class, you were getting boned by that.
Sure.
And so when I hear somebody going, we're going to tax unrealized gains, and it's, and that would be on real estate too. I know I'm getting, I mean, if you're an average working person, you're getting boned. And I think that there is this leeriness, but there is a disconnect. But I think it kind of gets there. I mean,
okay. So it's moving again, in that direction.
Politicians are full of shit. It is basically what I would tell you. And they will say anything to get elected, which I also will tell you. But that doesn't mean that there's, good governance. I mean, I guess it could be less cynical and say, well, you campaign in prose or you campaign in poetry and you govern by prose. But again, but I think there is. I mean, if in 1980, you said the Republican was going to be for a 30% tariff on that, or a 20% tariff, whatever Trump proposed, on everything imports, you would say you're out of your fucking mind. That's socialism.
I think okay. So let me ask you a question. Can we jump really quickly to the Senate races, because I saw something interesting this week. It looks like Real Clear Politics has now flipped Texas to leaning in Colin Allred's favor, which is
Shocking.
shocking to the point where I don't know if I believe it. But also today, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Beto, O'Rourke, and the Austin Congressman Greg Kazar are at a couple Texas universities in Central. They're like at UT and they're at Texas State. We said before that bringing in national money and national issues into Texas and Florida were big losers for the Senate candidates running. Is it a good idea? I'm going to start with that question. Is it a good idea for Bernie, AOC, Beto, and Greg Kazar to be campaigning so loudly and obtusely? Or maybe does it not matter as much because they're focusing on young people at universities? They're not like out talking to normal people.
No, it's bad. Because, well, let me rephrase that. It's really good for AOC and Bernie and the local congressman, but it's bad for Allred because now Allred has to. I guarantee you, if it's not, there is scripting being approved and voiceovers being done and spots being cut about the Allred AOC Bernie spot, and they will find the most insane things that they said, which with AOC it could be last week's thing, and they're going to link Allred to it. So as opposed to being like a moderate Democrat, he's going to become AOC. They're going to AOC him. And the proof is going to be of them on the platform with their hands raised together or whatever the footage that will document that. And he can explain it. And so, what I would say is that sometimes you have to take that hit. And in campaigns that when I would have an unpopular Bush or I'd have an unpopular Trump to raise money for the campaign, you were like, do it early. Let's do it as early as we can do it because you want the money because it's going to be a huge chunk of change. So you get unpopular people in, but it's just like, why is Allred trying to drive himself left? I mean, if you're on a college campus and you're not coming out to vote against Trump or for Harris,
right?
And against Cruz, who you coming out for?
I agree with you. And your words echoed in my head when I saw this. I thought, this is a big mistake. I'm also not a huge fan of Beto O'Rourke, not as a person. I don't know him, but as a candidate, I don't think he understands how to run as a politician. And I think it felt to me more like a bunch of anchors around Allred's neck than as anything uplifting him. And given how well he's done without it, I felt like, why change now? You're in the last month. Like, keep doing what you're doing. Just pour more gas on that fire that you already have cooking. Don't bring anything else into it.
Well, I think we talked about in Florida in 2020. Val Demings.
Oh yeah,
I won't say she had Marco Rubio on the ropes, but she had him in trouble. And then the Democrats came in and nationalized the race. And she got blown out, but she was running a really smart race. It was hyper local and kind of like, do you really want this guy? Is he 100%. Showing up to work, or is he more busy doing other things? And she was making a fairly compelling case, and then they nationalized the race, and that was it. And if they nationalize the race, he's going to lose.
Agree. All right, let me ask you about another race. Yeah. So I know that you're doing a couple of House races. Yeah. Have you followed at all this guy, Derek Anderson, running for Spanberger's seat in Virginia 7th?
No, but she was a really good candidate, by the way. I was a big fan of her campaigns.
Yeah, I assume she's going to be the next governor. I think she's got what it takes. This guy, so I happened to see this on Twitter, but they took some screen grabs from a video, and I think it's still on his YouTube channel. I need to double check now, but it was a campaign video that they didn't air it on TV, but it's him with like a wife and 3 daughters. They're not his family. And then later in the ad, it's him at a dining room table with the same woman and the same 3 daughters, still not his family. They are the family. They are the wife and 3 daughters of his friend. And he's been called out. I mean, there was a New York Times article about it. There's also something in the Post, which I have will link to. But the campaign says this is ridiculous. He wasn't trying to make it look like he had a family. It's like, dude, hey, don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. I see with my eyes what you got going on here. You're like standing behind the family. And interestingly enough, he is single, but now engaged. But the campaign said, if you look in the New York Post article, it says something like the candidate is single and lives with his dog and is newly engaged. And I was like, okay, I don't know. This is fucking weird. Any thoughts on that blowing?
Yeah, it's fucking insane. The thought that you would not get caught, number one, is insane.
Totally.
I mean, it's like, and number two, like, it's just stupid. It's stupid. And now when you hear that, you kind of go, oh, he's gay. And I mean, that's the conclusion a normal person will come to, as opposed to saying, I'm gay. I mean, there have been gay. I mean, especially in Virginia, especially in that district, being gay isn't, it's not a terrible thing,
And the guy's a former Green Beret. He's got a lot of shit going for him.
Yeah, and it's okay.
I don't care who you love. And he's engaged.
It's okay to be single. It's okay to be single. Yeah, I'm a single guy, right?
100%, 100%. And the interesting, he is engaged. There is a photo that's attached to the Post article, and she's a beautiful young lady. And I don't know why he didn't just have her in the picture, in the thing. Like, we don't have kids yet, but we look forward to having a family someday. I just don't understand the logic of this whole thing. I really don't. What's interesting to me, though, and this is where my mind goes.
Yeah.
The most fucking crazy part of this is that he actually has a friend who went along with this idea of like, just use my family. I would have said, dude, are you fucking nuts? I'm like, what
were the pictures, the baseball pictures that swapped families? Remember those guys? There's a baseball picture that swapped.
No, tell me.
Oh, they were with the Mets, and literally they swapped families. Like the husbands went,
not as a joke.
They swapped families, and one kind of blew up immediately, but the other one, God, I can't remember it right now, but there is, if you can find it on YouTube, there was something called The Selling of Vince D'Angelo, which Danny DeVito did as an HBO half-hour show in like 1984. It's worth saying because it's hysterical. But in the movie, he's running for the U.S. Senate, and Rhea Perlman, his real-life wife, is his wife, and they're trying to film the TV commercial about the happy candidate with the family, and and the wife is going, eat that or I'll fucking stab you with this fork. And they're yelling back and forth and they're doing all kinds of stuff. And so, and they're trying to film the commercial and it's a disaster because the kids are all little thugs. And when they show the actual commercial, they hired actors and they're all these kind of blonde kids, these Barbie looking kids. But
the joke, 1973 Yankees pitchers Fritz Peterson and Mike Kekich announced they had traded families. Yeah. Only a professional athlete would frame it that way. We traded families. Sorry, you're no longer with this organization.
Oh, the whole story. I mean, it's like a wormhole. You can spend a couple hours. It's worthwhile going down that. And it's just like, you kind of go like, and at first when I remember when it came out, when it came out, it was the mid-70s.
Yeah, you're right.
And everybody went wife swappers. They're, swingers, wife swappers. That's what they were into. And it kind of, but no, they fucking traded families.
I mean, you have to kind of admire the commitment to the life, I guess, right? Like, I'm kind of like, well, they took it to the logical conclusion, I guess. I would love to talk to those guys now. I would I would love to talk to them now and be like, what was that about? Two last things before I know you got to jump.
Yep.
Did you see the guy who paid, here in Texas, the guy who paid $4,000 for a guitar with a Taylor Swift signature on it, walks up after bidding on it, buying it, gets a hammer and destroys it as a political statement?
Yeah, I mean, fuck me. I mean, you know what? I mean, I mean, sell it to, sell it to charity, put it back. I mean, do something, sell it to charity and give it the money to the NRA or whatever the fuck you want to do. But it's just like, it's
That
so,
now that would have been funny, right? Like that
yeah,
would have pissed Taylor Swift off, right? Give it
right,
to like some anti-abortion.
right,
Yeah, exactly.
right. Yeah.
Two things struck me about that. It's very hard to say people are suffering in the Biden Harris economy when you're going to spend $4,000 and shit it away
Yeah.
like that. The other thing was, come to find out, it wasn't actually an authenticated Taylor Swift signed guitar. It was probably just something that somebody bought that got at
That's
the
right.
the local market or whatever. So,
That's great.
um, and then the last thing I wanted to say was Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday.
Yeah.
That is incredible, by the way. However, have you ever seen the movie Seven?
Yes. I love it.
A great movie, excellent movie. Does Jimmy Carter not look like the sloth guy that they break
Yeah.
in? And he's like,
Yeah.
he looks, I saw it and I was like, oh my God. Like
Yeah.
this guy looks like the dude from Seven.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't want to, like, if I'm that old, I
Nobody
don't want
wants
to
to
look like
live
that.
to 100.
And frankly, and the idea that we said, hey, let's fucking wheel Jimmy out and looking at his, kind of rotting corpse, because that'll be a good thing. Happy birthday. But by the way, somebody said, which was, I will say, darkly, grimly funny. It's like, do you think Iran launched the attack on Israel just to fuck with Jimmy Carter's birthday? Which is,
Uh,
considering Iran was pretty much.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to be like, yeah,
We didn't really talk about,
it's the corpse.
we didn't, we, yeah, I agree with you. Like when they wheeled him out and stuff, and I was looking at him in that thing, and he doesn't even look like he's actually
Yeah.
alive. Anyway, I was like, man, this poor guy. I know he just wants to die. He's
I'm sure you've met people that are at 100 or a little over 100, and they're still kind of a little with it. I mean, they're not.
Yeah.
You're not going to go out, clubbing with them. But I mean, it's
right.
they're lucid. But this was like, holy fuck. I mean, like, I don't want to live like that.
Yeah. Nah. All right. I guess we'll leave it there. I wanted to let you know, interestingly enough, my sister lives in a country close to Israel, and they actually recorded the attack from their window and sent it on our family thread. So it was a really interesting view. We will maybe talk. Well, hopefully nothing bad happens between now and the next episode, but we will have to get into what the Middle East is going to do to the election season.
Sounds good, man. All right.
I think they said during the debate, Chris, that 20 states have already started voting. So we might have to look at the effects of that as well.
All right, man.
See you in a week, my friend.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have it, guys. That was the last episode. I think we really went deep on this one, and would love your feedback. But in addition to going deep, I think we highlighted a couple of the things where, how we see the impact of certain events on the political side. But I think also some of the policy stuff and how that really matters. I think it's an interesting take that Chris has and that we've talked about with kind of the breaking up of traditional kind of views of the party and how that's going to go and how it actually jives with vote records and in Congress and stuff like that. Again, we didn't dive too deep into the Israel, kind of Iran escalating tensions there. The hope is that it doesn't get any farther. And there's no additional escalation, but the world we live in, that can't be guaranteed. I do think it's important to think through what things will happen in the next 30 days as we approach election day that will affect the outcome of the election. And then also thinking, what does that mean for us? If events beyond people's control can affect the outcome, what does that mean for a democracy? What does that mean for the United States, where and maybe there are debates about what's within people's control and what isn't, but ultimately not everything is within our control. Interesting talk today. We're post VP debate. I think we all, at least Chris and I, agreed it was a good night for Vance. Won't have much of an effect on the election overall. And I would encourage all of you to take a look at fantasyelect.io. We have a current battleground polling contest running right now, and we'll see what changes happen in the battleground states over the next couple of days. post-debate. So, as always, appreciate you being here. Please subscribe, like, share, and probably most important, leave a comment so that we can actually have a conversation back and forth. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Draft picks in the Senate, game on the floor. Campaign slogans echo final scores. Analysis deep as the trench warfare set. We break it down, no sweat, no net. Balance and touchdowns, where's your bet? Candidate playbooks, lines we set. Irreverent and free, we call it out. Competition fierce, ain't no doubt. Blitz and a Hail Mary pass. Legislation touchdowns, who's